Hey everyone, Road to Boston Day 4 is here, and today we're going to be talking about specific marathon pace training that you're going to want to be doing separate from some other training types that we've talked about. So as a reminder, I'm Coach Kyle of Freedom Running Club, and we're looking here at the beginning of this series about different workouts you're going to want to be doing in this time of year. This is coming out about 2 months or so before Boston, a little bit less than that. So the idea is that you've already done a lot of that easy work in your training. So we're looking at specific training types that you can use to enhance your fitness as you're getting to the Boston Marathon race time. So marathon pace workouts that are specific, their own standalone type workouts. The last video we looked at marathon pace on hills, and we specifically referenced that that type of workout would be in addition to something like this. So what does that look like? We're talking about a workout that's, not pace work done during your long runs, although you would probably want to do that too, depending on your training plan. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the series. But we're just talking about, your hour 10, hour 15 minute type runs that you're going to be doing in the middle of the week. Maybe you do them the day before your long runs if you want to go out on your long runs on tired legs, something that's its own standalone type training. And that's what we're going to be looking at here. So in terms of design, let's talk about that. You're going to be doing some kind of warm-up. I like doing this continuous because when you do runs like this continuous, you get more time training in the zone. So you get a lot of those aerobic benefits from long, easy distance by not having a big break, by, stopping, doing an extra set of drills, changing shoes, anything like that. So on these days, I like to have kind of like a faster type shoes, maybe not like a plated shoe, although you definitely could use it on this. So you're going straight from the warm-up directly into the training, and then your cooldown's kind of all attached as one continuous run with some pace variation. So what that can look like, I myself typically need a little bit more of a warm-up before doing something like this on anything but race day. So I'm doing something like, say, 20 minutes, maybe 2.5 miles, something like that. I usually do a lot of things based on time. So I usually like to do about 20 minutes, which usually gets me to about 2.5 miles, something like that. You could do as little as like 10 minutes. If you like doing it based on miles, that could be a mile and a half, whatever it is, to where you feel like you're super good, warmed up, your heart rate's gotten to a good level, and then you're gonna go right into your marathon pace work. So when you do that, like I said, I like doing 20 minutes because I also program these workouts based on time. So, you might start with something like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, build up to 30. I wouldn't really do more than like 40 or 45 minutes. If you're doing something longer than that, you're doing it more for the mental benefits of, hey, I can hold it for this amount of time. You're not really getting a lot more physiologically improvements at that point, but you're getting a lot of fatigue. So I usually cap these at about 40 minutes, unless it's somebody that, has 2 months, 3 months before their goal race. We don't have like a half marathon or something where we can really practice this. We might do something like a 60-minute time trial or something like that at marathon pace. But there's specific reasons why you do that. Most of the time you're doing, like I said, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that, going right into the marathon pace effort. You can do that based on distance. You might say, I'm doing 3 miles, I'm doing 5 miles at marathon pace, whatever. Again, I just like time because I think that's a lot easier to kind of manage in a lot of these cases. So that could, again, look something like 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes at marathon pace, and then a cool down of like 20 minutes, something like that. So that would be like a 70-minute run, something like that. You can adjust it based on how much time you have. You could shorten the cool down a little bit. You don't necessarily get a lot of need for a cool down on marathon pace days because you're not accumulating a lot of acid. It's really just, again, keeping the heart rate going, loosening things up, continuing with the blood flow and speeding up the healing process. So you don't need a super long cool down on a day like this. It's actually, technically from the science, it's not even really needed from a lot of the reasons you would do a cool down. I still like doing it. It helps me to reset and get ready for the next day. And again, you're getting more continuous time with your heart rate elevated for just general aerobic growth. So that's what that looks like, and some of the whys with that. We just mentioned general aerobic growth. Why are you even doing things right at marathon pace? Well, basically what you're doing is you're getting more economical at that pace, right? So whenever you're running a specific pace, your body gets better at running that pace. It really kind of can program that in, and you can become more energy efficient. That's super important on race day in the marathon because the limiting factor is always going to be, fuel storage. That's why people hit the wall in the marathon as they run out of carbohydrates. There's some new things with fatigue that are coming into place, but that's still a really critical factor. So if you can be more efficient at that pace what your race pace is. And when I say your race pace, even like, you know, where you are, you know, at this point with Boston, your race pace, you're not going to accumulate a ton more fitness. So you really want to be practicing at what you know your race pace is going to be. You're going to be more efficient at it. There is some science that also suggests that going at this intensity, which is right around 82% of your VO2 max, heart rate around 155-ish, something like that. There's variation for everybody, and there's a way that I work with my athletes to figure out what their marathon pace really should be. But running right at that intensity, there is some evidence that suggests that your mitochondria actually get a little bit better at metabolizing fat for a fuel source at that bigger intensity. That allows you to be more economical as well. Again, because if you're using more fat as a fuel source at this intensity, you're sparing the carbohydrates, you're sparing that fuel source that will run out in a marathon because of the amount of time. So that's a really key thing. So why are we only doing this here? Why are we splitting this up? You know, different from, say, your long run. I mentioned in the previous video how you would do marathon pace hills. That's 2 workouts in a week, things like that. Well, there was this new study that came out last year where they were looking at, I believe it was 5,000 participants in the Boston Marathon from 2022. Really like this study. This group actually did a number of things from that Boston Marathon in 2022 where they were looking at things like, you know, energy availability, but this in particular was looking at their training. One of the key takeaways from this was the people that did better in the Boston Marathon were running more miles longer out than they anticipated. I'm going to do a whole video at some point on this study. I think it's really fascinating. But what this study also shows, and I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen here so you can see it. I'll make reference of it down in the caption so you can look at it if you want. Always take a look at, whenever somebody says, a study says, take a look at it yourself. But, you know, if you want a summary of it when it comes to sessions during the week, they actually tracked, you know, the people that did better in this Boston Marathon versus the ones who were not as successful in terms of sessions or workouts. And they judged that a couple different ways. They kind of let the participants decide a little bit on that, but essentially that's going to be workouts, structured long runs, general long runs. The people that did an extra session per week actually got over 3 minutes on average better than the ones that did fewer sessions per week, right? And that was judged based on, you know, there were some cutoffs that were going on there when they were looking at the number of sessions, but this is a great way to get another session in a safe, specific way that's super specific to success in a marathon. That actually, with this more recent evidence, this came out in 2025 when they published this findings. And I mean, 3 minutes, that's huge improvement. That could be somebody qualifying for Boston, setting their PR, something like that. These were people running at the Boston Marathon, obviously, so they've qualified or gotten in somehow. But, and these were actually a little bit more veteran runners too, people who had been doing this for a while. So big takeaway from that study that I really want to always tell my athletes when I'm kind of making reference to it. That meant that these people weren't overdoing it either. You can't run a 3 minutes better if you're, you know, if you're hurt, if you're in the training room, for lack of a better word. So they were doing the right amount for them, but the people who could structure workouts that were beneficial in terms of physiological growth, did not injure them, and could do it consistently on average throughout the training year, they got on average over 3 minutes better. I'll actually put that part of the study up on the screen so you can actually take a look at it specifically. So that's specific marathon pace workouts, you know, what they are, why they can help you physiologically, and specifically for Boston Marathon with the study that I'm referencing here, how, you know, adding a specific workout like this in addition to, say, your long run, marathon pace hills, short, fast hills, I talked about that in a previous video, whatever your sessions are, can really directly lead to improvement in your Boston Marathon time, or whatever marathon you're getting ready for. So that's the end of this video. We're going to be back with rolling easy hills here in the next video.